Susanna, good morning.
Good morning, John. Thank you very much, and good morning to all our exporters. We're going to have a very, very focused webinar today, really focused on how to really manage the whole VAT space for e-commerce and across Europe. So Claire's really the expert on that. Before we get there, this is what you see is our agenda. We're really going to focus on VAT, as I said, but John will be conducting polls. Q&A is at the end, and we've left some time for that. Just a quick overview first of Europe and the e-commerce scene that I'll be outlining initially, just a few slides. And before you start getting out your pens and papers, don't worry, you will be getting the slide deck as well as a recording of this webinar, so you don't have to take notes or anything else. We'll hand it to you later by email. So just sit back, relax, and just enjoy and listen and learn. So here we go. So I guess the first lesson that we had was sort of this light bulb moment when we suddenly realized that country-specific websites allowed exporters to really reach into target markets and solve a lot of the issues and problems that exporters had, and in particular to reach out and be credible to their local markets. And this is really key for any e-commerce company who's looking to engage local audiences and to be trustworthy and trusted in that market and accessible. So apart from allowing sort of marketing and organizing your distributors, it also allows you that local credibility, which is so important for exporters. So quickly, sort of, with Europe itself, Europe is just absolutely perfect for an online strategy. We all, hear a lot about sort of the EU and the single market. We all know it's not a single market, it's a mosaic. Hence the need for a VAT solution like Simply VAT can give you, because this is really a mosaic of lots of different markets. And although it has a single market aspect to it, it has a lot of local parameters. When we're looking at priority markets, what's interesting for us as well, if you're looking as a UK exporter and you're saying which markets should I target first, one of the keys that we have is just to say, okay, go for the big guys, Germany, UK, France, that's, basically is 50% of EU GDP. And then there's the whole areas around those markets, and that's increasingly the case now with cross-border e-commerce that we're seeing, and that both I and Claire will be talking about a bit later. So these are spheres of influence which are useful to have as well across Europe. The key drivers for European e-commerce today, they're really, we all know it's definitely high growth, certainly much higher than anything you would see in the retail market. It's double digit, it's ongoing. One of the key emphasis that we want to really stress here is that B2B is about twice the size of B2C. So we talk a lot about B2C, and it's very well documented, a lot of numbers, but the real driver is actually B2B. So if you are a B2B model, don't ignore the e-commerce space. Finally, the main trends, obviously it's mobile, and this is now being even called Uberification. It's basically as people are reaching for their iPads and telephones increasingly for e-commerce services and goods. So that's one of the key drivers, and Google actually made this part of their algorithm as of April 2015. And the other point, as I already mentioned to you, is this cross-border e-commerce coming of age. And the spheres of influence that we talked about, we've done a lot of work about this. For example, if you have a German website where you're not just reaching the 82 million consumers in Germany, you're reaching the 14 million Dutch, the 6 million Czechs, the Austrians, the Poles, and so on. So worth having.
Susanna, excuse me, could I jump in there, and can I suggest a quick poll? Is this an ideal time to ask people which markets? Let me launch a quick poll, so please, I'm launching a poll now. There you go. Please, you can see on your screen which markets are your country-specific e-commerce websites targeting. There you go, don't hesitate. Put the information in. I can see 100% to the UK. Germany is at 33%. This is a race. France is at 33%. Italy is at 22%. Germany is at now at 46%. Very interesting. We will have these results and of course submit them, and you will have all of this information afterwards. I'm going to close the poll now, and I thank you very much and hand back to Susanna.
Thank you, John. One last slide, just again giving you some numbers about the percentage of people who have shopped online in the percent. So this is the penetration rate of e-commerce, as it were, and the average yearly spend. You can see that the UK there is really leading the pack in terms of average spend. But you know, there's some very strong numbers and strong growth rates, both north and south of Europe. And with that sort of overview, I just wanted to hand over to Claire. Claire, if you're ready and there, that'd be great to talk about some of the VAT issues.
I am. Thank you very much, Susanna. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be able to pass this information to all the online retailers out there, because it's very important information that can become business critical if you ignore it. So to start with, selling abroad, there's obviously to think about. There's the obvious language differences and the not so obvious cultural nuances, such as cultural differences in payment method preferences. For example, the Germans like a bank transfer, whereas here in the UK we much prefer our debit cards or PayPal. And then, of course, there's the rules and regulations surrounding international VAT. People just don't know they've got an international VAT obligation, or indeed don't want to know. The usual response we've found is head down in the sand, and this can work for a while, but it's not a permanent solution. So what do you as the online retailer need to think about? What actually are the different rules and regulations? So first of all, there's some basic questions which you need to ask, which will give the clues as to which VAT treatments will apply. What are you selling? Is it a good or a service? Who are you selling it to? A business or a consumer? Where are you as the seller based? Are you sat inside the EU or outside the EU? And where are your customers? Again, are they inside or outside the EU? So today we're actually concentrating on EU-based businesses. So I'm going to talk you through those different scenarios, but bear in mind this is really high-level information. Get expert advice which is going to be specific to your own business. So to start with, we're looking at business to business within the EU. Now there's no obligation for you as the seller to VAT register in any other EU country. The customer accounts for the VAT as long as certain criteria is met. And these are if you get your customer's valid VAT number, you've got proof that the goods left the UK or whichever country you're sat in within the EU and went to the customer in another EU country, and your invoice shows their VAT number along with the obligatory phrase that the customer is liable to account for the VAT. And of course there's some documentation that needs to happen. You need to fill out the EC sales list. You also need to think about whether you are above the Intrastat declarations thresholds. Now I don't know if all of you are familiar with the Intrastat declarations. These are statistical reports that the EU governments ask for. They actually monitor the movement of goods within the EU, and the governments use the information as an economic indicator for the performance of any country. But these are only required when the set thresholds are exceeded, and these differ from the VAT thresholds, which I'm going to talk you through very shortly. A number of, sorry.
Claire, no, sorry, pardon me. I was just thinking, is this a good time for a poll related to B2B or B2C? Shall I quickly launch a poll, or and then we just...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'm launching another poll, so here we go. Please, everybody. We're asking you in your country-specific e-commerce websites targeting, are you business-focused? Are you consumer-focused? Are you both? Now we've got information coming through. 38% are saying they're focused on consumers, 16% focused on B2B, and actually 55%, the majority, are saying that they're focused on B2B and B2C. Please continue to poll. I will close the poll in 5 seconds time. Very interesting, and as I say, we will be providing you with this information at the end. So here we go. I'm closing the poll, and Claire, over to you.
Thank you, John. That is interesting. The Intrastat is relevant whether you're B2B or B2C. So some countries change their thresholds at the start of this year, and if you go to our website, you can find the new thresholds there. But it is actually a criminal offence not to fill out the Intrastat declarations. But to be honest, I haven't heard of anyone going to prison yet for not doing it. Okay, so we're going to move on to selling services to businesses. Now the VAT is treated differently. The place where the service is taxable, not where it is physically supplied, is critical. So for VAT purposes, the EU VAT directive states that the place of supply of a service is the place where the VAT registered customer is established. This is known as the general rule for the place of supply of services. Now, under this general rule, the service is taxable where the customer is based and not where the service is physically supplied. So in this situation, there's no requirement for the supplier to register for VAT in the country where the VAT is taxable, but instead the customer accounts for the VAT in his own country under the reverse charge mechanism. However, of course, there's going to be exceptions to this rule, and these relate to land-related services or admissions to events. For example, land-related services are taxed where the land is located, and admission to events is taxed where the event is taking place and not where the supplier is. So again, you need to find out specific information that's relevant to your business's services. So now we're moving on to selling to consumers in the EU, and from the results of that poll, I think this is going to be relevant to the majority of you. Now, if you're selling goods online to consumers in Europe, you're governed by the distance selling VAT rules. Now, these rules apply even if you're not a VAT registered business and even if you're a sole trader or what you might perceive as being an amateur sat in your bedroom selling on one of the marketplaces like Amazon. They also apply, as I said, with the marketplaces such as eBay and Amazon, but be fully aware that the marketplaces do not take responsibility for the VAT of you as the seller. And also, I know we've got some American people listening in, these rules only apply when selling to EU customers. They don't apply to selling to non-EU based customers, and I'll talk about this a bit later. So what exactly are these distance selling rules? Now the rules state that you charge local VAT until the distance sales threshold set by each EU tax authority is exceeded in that country in any one calendar year. In most countries the threshold is €35,000 or the equivalent, except in a handful, namely Germany, Netherlands, Luxembourg and the UK, where it's set at €100,000. For people selling into the UK, it's actually £70,000. And just be aware that France reduced its threshold at the start of this year from €100,000 to €35,000. So this might catch a few of you out if you're doing quite well in France but didn't think you'd actually reach the 100,000 threshold yet. And if you exceed one of the thresholds and fail to register, you can get hit with significant penalties and interest payments.
Wow, Claire, can I jump in there in that case and say, look, please, one more poll. This one we're intending to ask you yourself about your own VAT registration. So this would be very relevant. And right, there we go. Here's the launch, please. Are you over your VAT registration? Now, Claire's just shared that information with you. Perhaps you knew this or didn't, but there you go. How are you doing? If so, where? It's country by country. So 50% are saying for the UK, 20% for Germany, 20% for France, 20% for Italy. I mean, this is very interesting. Claire will be able to pick up on this information, by the way, and help you going forward if you have concerns. So this is what this poll is all about. Please, I will close this poll in 5 seconds' time. Thank you very much indeed for participating. There was one more poll. I'm going to close this now. And Claire, back to you.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, so you can get hit by interest and penalties, and please don't think you can go under the radar. The EU governments, to stop the hemorrhaging of undeclared VAT, introduced special measures across the EU. Mutual cooperation was set up in 2012. They've got special units focused on each other, on e-commerce, sorry. They talk to each other and they do share data. They also can approach the marketplaces to ask for sales data on individual companies, which the marketplaces do provide. We've got clients that have been caught out by the tax authorities and are having to now negotiate their way out of hefty interest payments. One company we know have been trading really successfully since 2007 in one of the main marketplaces. Very profitable setup, all was going really well. But you don't know what you don't know until you know it, of course. They got approached by the German and French tax authorities last year wanting information on the volume of sales in each of those countries. The company actually owed both countries over €1 million in VAT. Luckily for them, they had been paying it in the UK, so it wasn't a case of tax evasion, but there's some quite heavy interest payments that have been levied to the tune in Germany, for example, of £150,000. So ignore the VAT rules at your peril because it can become business critical. So for you, the online sellers, you need to be really aware of your tax obligations. Ignorance is no defence in the eyes of the tax authorities. The head down in the sand approach can work for a while, but it really isn't a long-term solution. So just really to bring home this message, non-registration and non-payment of VAT from your online sales in the EU is not a safe option. Okay, so just going forward to give you an idea of the practicalities of how the distance selling rules work. We're going to look at an example here, and this is an example. We're going to take a UK company selling into Europe. Say you're selling maybe mobile phone covers from the UK to Hungary. Chosen Hungary because it's got the highest rate of VAT at 27%. So you start with, you're well below the Hungarian threshold of the Florence equivalent of €35,000. At this point, you're going to be charging UK VAT because you're a UK company, unless, of course, you're not VAT registered in the UK. If this is the case, you do not charge VAT prior to the Hungarian threshold being reached. As you approach the Hungarian threshold, you know your sales are going to continue to rise over the threshold. You need to register for VAT there, and you're going to start charging Hungarian VAT either at their standard rate of 27% or a reduced rate of VAT, whichever is applicable to your particular goods that you're selling. And once registered, you've got to file the periodic VAT returns at the time and the frequency that that particular tax authority requires. And you stay registered as long as your distance sales exceed the threshold. If your sales drop off for any reason or you actually want to exit that market, you can do so, but again, the rules vary from country to country, and it depends on which country you're actually registered in, how soon you can. Some let you register after a year, and others want you to stay registered for a couple of years. And whilst we're here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about pricing, because it's a really good plan. It's really good to plan up front. When you're setting your pricing, does one size fit all? The VAT rates vary across Europe from 17 to 27%. So can the margins that you've actually got within your products absorb these variations if you become successful, say in Denmark or Hungary, where the VAT rates are 5-7% higher than, for example, in the UK, or Germany's at 19%. So it's a really good idea to do some market research in your chosen markets and find out how you compare to local suppliers, how much leeway you've got if all of a sudden you do become successful and you have to start charging the higher rate. If we go back to this mobile phone cover example, you can see here the application of the different VAT rates really impacts on your bottom line. And if you're selling a large amount of units, this can affect your margins quite badly. Is it better to have a net price and add the appropriate VAT in each country, or does one size fit all? You need to do the sums and make a commercial decision on what suits your business. So we wanted to give you an example of how it works if you're selling in multiple countries in the EU. Again, we're assuming we're a UK company, and if you look at the top line, the turnover, the figures in red are the sterling figures where you would have exceeded the VAT thresholds in those countries. Also in blue, we've got Germany. Here you've got 99,000 euros of sales. You're just about to trip over the 100,000 euro threshold. So it's advisable to register ready to start charging German VAT as soon as your sales go over the threshold. But until you're to that point, you're going to be charging UK VAT in those German sales. And also in Poland, you're well below the threshold, so you're just charging UK VAT in Poland. And don't forget, if you're not VAT registered here, we've got quite a high local VAT registration threshold of £82,000. So if you might well not be VAT registered here, but you would still need, if you exceed the distance selling rules, you would still need to register in other countries if you exceed their thresholds. So just going on to the next slide. So it really doesn't take much to go over the thresholds, especially if you've got medium to high value goods. If you're selling Jimmy Choos, for example, or an expensive diving watch, it doesn't take much to take you over the 35,000 euro threshold, which is in most of the EU markets. And it's interesting, France is one area where a lot of UK companies sell, and the lowering of their threshold is going to have quite an impact on your VAT compliance costs, because in France you actually have to refund, you have to submit the VAT returns monthly. Okay, just moving on to using fulfillment centres, which are becoming popular, but there's an area of confusion or lack of knowledge, information about the VAT compliance issues here. Now, if you're thinking of using or already use one of the many fulfillment centres that are now available in Europe, you've got to be aware that moving your goods there for onward sale to private individuals triggers an immediate need for you to VAT register in that country. As the goods are not sold, but they're delivered from one EU country to another, it's not considered a distant sale. Therefore, the distant sales rules don't apply. As a non-resident, there's no thresholds to exceed. The fulfillment centre usually doesn't take ownership of the goods, but it depends on your particular contract with them. If in doubt, check. And again, sorry. Hi, John.
Yeah, hello, Claire. It's me again. Sorry, I'm just thinking, I've got a poll. What about the poll? Are you planning a fulfillment centre? Could I jump in there and just launch this poll, and then you head back to that? This is just a quick one. Here we go. A quick launch there to say, are you planning to using a fulfillment center? If so, where? I mean, clearly fulfillment centers are key to the whole e-commerce and international export development program, and absolutely key where Claire can be helping you in the future. So please, very interesting. We have 11%, 18% in Germany and the Netherlands. The Netherlands is always very, very strong in fulfillment centers, and we all know why. And 64% other, 18% in Europe. Eastern Europe, 18%. There we go. So Germany, 18, Netherlands, 18. There we go. Again, this information will be shared at a later date. Claire, I'm closing that one and back over to you.
Thank you, John. Okay, so just again to give you kind of real live examples of the impact of the VAT obligations and not knowing the rules. We know somebody, again, trading really successfully, got schmoozed into the fulfillment centres in France and Germany a couple of years back, and again, the traction some of these marketplaces have to get you to your customers is just brilliant. So doing really well. 18 months later, a knock on the door from the German tax authorities and was presented with a back tax bill of 80,000 euros, which he had to pay. Again, no way of avoiding it. And then put his hands up with the French tax authorities and had to sort that out too. So it really is a good idea to find out your VAT compliance obligations, because it could materially affect your cash flow if you get it wrong. So just moving on to drop shipping, because this has started to become really popular. Now, drop shipping is where a seller takes an order from a customer, but the order is delivered directly from a supplier who may be in another country. If this happens, who has the VAT liability depends on who is invoicing the end customer. So in this case here, the UK seller may have the liability to actually register in both countries, in Poland and Germany. It really depends on who and where the UK seller takes ownership of the goods, and again, it's strongly advised to speak to somebody to talk through the particulars of your own particular scenario. In this case, the drop shipper, the German supplier, only has the VAT liability if he sells directly to the German end consumer, and then of course it's not drop shipping. So that really covers the B2C goods rules selling in the EU. We're going to have a quick look now at selling e-services. Up until the start of last year, selling e-services to consumers, the VAT was accounted for where the supplier was based, and this is actually still the case when selling non-digital services to consumers. But if you're selling broadcasting, telecommunications, electronic services to consumers, the rules changed at the start of 2015, and it was a fundamental change. Instead of VAT being accounted for where you, the seller, was, it's now charged where the consumer resides. So the seller needs to collate all the relevant information on where your customer is. You need to know the VAT rate to apply to a particular service, and the information needs to be given to the relevant tax authorities. Now, there's actually some really good software in the market that can be plugged into your e-commerce shops that can help with this. So actually reporting it to the tax authorities, you can either do it through the local VAT registrations, as I covered in the distance selling rules, or through MOS, which is the mini one-stop shop. Designed apparently to make the process easier. You submit through one member state. For example, if you're sat in the UK through HMRC, and this registration allows you to submit the VAT data through that one tax authority who's going to distribute it to the other various tax authorities along with the payments due. There has just been information from HMRC that they are people below the threshold in the UK may not have to register for VATMOS going forward, so a lot of lobbying has actually come to fruition, especially in this country. But remember, this only applies to e-services and not at the moment to the sale of goods to private consumers. So looking, again, if you're sat in the EU selling to non-EU customers, you can generally zero rate your supplies if they're exported outside the European Union, provided you follow rules, especially with goods, that you provide evidence of export, that the goods have actually left the EU. As I said, this is zero rated. Okay, so now just coming to summarize, it's really useful to do your homework, as I've tried to instill throughout the presentation. If you're thinking about trading internationally, you need to understand that there's a cost of VAT compliance. whether it's an internal cost of language capability and IT alignment with the various tax authorities, or the cost of using companies such as ourselves to take on the compliance process for you. You need to factor it alongside other staples within your cash flow, like web hosting, which wasn't one of our staples in our cash flows a few years ago, or accountancy fees, which have always been there. Preparation and planning is a vital part of the journey. Many businesses, though, who've made the leap to go internationally find the cost of compliance is far outweighed by the increased profits. So really, can you afford not to sell in Europe and indeed internationally? So we're saying to you, don't let VAT be your barrier to global domination. There is help out there, and obviously we would love to be part of your international expansion journey.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'm just going to summarize a couple of things, and then we're going to go on to some questions. I guess for us, this wonderful photo of global domination for an exporter it sums it all up. And what do you have to have besides fantastic products, great prices, great people? Well, for us, one of the keys also is just to make sure that you have these 5 golden rules. You've got to make sure that you have the right payment methods. Delivery obviously is key. The good returns policy is absolutely essential in today's e-commerce world. But the 2 we're addressing today, rules, regulations for local markets, compliance, is really, as Claire has summed up, something you cannot avoid. You can't just put your head in the sand and say that's not going to happen. I think Claire's made a very strong case that it is complex, something you should outsource, and something you should get right from the beginning when you're starting your export journey. And from our point of view, from IBT's point of view, clearly the build and management of an international website is the other key ingredient that we would really stress on. And just sort of a brief thumb on that. This is a slide that I think sums it up in a sense of how to look and feel local. It's not just about translation. It's it's the Zs in the States and the Ss in the UK, and trucks become lorries and things like that. But it's even the look and feel of it. And this is, I think, a very funny example. On the left-hand side, you've got the advertisement for the website of Jaguar in the UK, Jaguar cars in the UK. It's got like a sort of a James Bond, and it's ready to rule. It means business that's tough and James Bondish. And on the right-hand side, you've got the US website for Jaguar, which is all about service. It's a token to James Bond as well as at your service, but it's very much service driven. And that's again just a little tweak towards a local feel as well, which I think is of interest. And obviously, how to get more traction locally. We would definitely advise using videos, and we would emphasize that the correct and compliance with rules, regulations like your VAT, like your internet compliance is essential, not just for compliance with the authorities, but for adding trust to your end consumers and businesses and clients. So from our point of view, country-specific websites, build them, market them, and equates to growing and expanding your business internationally. With that, I see we're really running out of time here. We're going to spend the rest of our time on some questions. And John, I think, has been creating some questions. I hope that you've been putting some questions in the Dropbox. John, are there any questions that have come through?
There certainly have. There are lots and lots of questions. I'm sorry, we will certainly not be able to respond to them all. I'm going to take 1 or 2 which I hope are very relevant to a good number. This one, Claire, when selling digital services, B2B, is the place of supply where the services are, or where the services consumed by the enterprise, is by the enterprise customer? What is your response to that?
Sorry, John, can you repeat the question?
When selling digital services, so this is all about digital services, B2B, is it the place of supply or the place of consumption that is relevant vis-a-vis VAT?
With the digital services, for the, is it business to business?
It is.
Okay, with the place of supply to businesses, it's the general rule should come into effect.
Okay, understood. Another quick one then. This one could be to Susanna. Susanna, why is the Netherlands always strong in terms of fulfillment? What have the Netherlands got? That's from Jack.
The Netherlands. Thank you, Jack. The Netherlands have got a real hold on logistics and supply centers. They have very, very favorable tax treatment for 3PL, for third-party logistics partners, and especially bonded warehouses. So these are warehouses where you only pay tax once the merchandise actually leaves that warehouse. So a lot of the export numbers, by the way, that you see for the Netherlands are also there because, I mean, they look incredibly high. Part of it is just because it's a transit. So you're stocking things in the Netherlands because of the tax treatment, particularly for bonded warehouses, and then they're going off across the rest of Europe once there's actually a demand for it. And then the Netherlands is known for logistics. There you go.
Indeed, thank you. Claire, how about, there's a nice question here for you, which is, how would I work with Simply VAT? How does a company contact you to work with you, and how does that process start?
Okay, well, please get in touch. You can email or telephone. Got my email address up on the slide there. We talk to you about your situation, about what you need to actually make you compliant in Europe or elsewhere. We can also help in other countries like Japan and Canada and Australia, Norway and Switzerland. So that's it. Yeah, please do get in touch and we'll talk to you straight away. Our business is really focused on working with the customer focused, to make sure we kind of hold your hand through, what can be quite a scary process for some people. But we're there, the whole ethos of the company is to try and make it as painless as possible and as understandable as possible.
Claire, thank you so much for that. I'm looking at these questions. I'm afraid we have a total of 35 questions, and as you can imagine, I'm so sorry we cannot get to them, but do know that we will be following up on these. That's the whole point of these questions. This information will be shared